We returned the spare key. The only thing the apartment wanted from us was to stop trying to be impressive. It was a fourth-floor walk-up above a deli that sold forgiveness in the shape of soup, and the radiator hissed like an old friend who knows how stories end. My name is Eli. The man I loved was Rowan. He bartended at a place with mirrors that taught people they were interesting. I designed playlists for stores that needed to pretend they had taste. Our lives were made of ordinary glamour. Free shift drinks, discount sneakers, two decent plants, a bowl for keys that looked like it had once had better plans. We met during a thunderstorm on a night the city decided to remind us of its voice. He made fun of my umbrella. I made fun of his belief in late buses. We kissed in the doorway of a vintage shop at closing while a clerk counted the till and pretended not to like us. We were good enough at being good that our friends relaxed around us. We were bad enough at being bad that we got interesting occasionally, which is how you get lazy with your own rules. We kept our rules on an index card taped to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon. We'd written them laughing one winter when the light left early. Be home when you say unless someone's heart is breaking and you can see it. Tell the truth before the room does. Be naked when you want to and never when you don't. We didn't write the one that would have saved us because it isn't a sentence so much as a weather report. Intrigue gathers where boredom stops believing in itself. When the bar got new owners, Rowan's schedule changed. He picked up closing shifts 3 nights a week and came home at 4 smelling like other people's last ideas. I stayed up the first few times and then stopped because I hate the shape of waiting rooms. He was too good at his job, which is a polite way of saying attention kept trying to pay him in a currency we didn't need. The first crack was a photo. He and a coworker named Milo took a selfie behind the bar, both of them with shirts damp and mouths doing the thing mouths do when they know they're being documented. It was harmless in the way gravity is harmless until roofs forget themselves. He blurred out the name on his name tag, which told me he had remembered something too late. I liked the photo on instinct and then put my phone face down like a line. Milo existed online the way some people exist in rumors, curated, athletic, rarely accidental. He wore t-shirts that let you know what they were for. He had a laugh so clean you wanted to throw something at it. Rowan started telling stories about Milo the way a person tells stories about a new coffee machine. Useful, constant, slightly obnoxious. I let myself be amused because jealousy is exhausting, and I was saving energy for being a person in public. Then came Theo. Every bar has a regular who thinks he's the mayor. Theo did design work for restaurants that like to be photographed. He had the right jacket for every wrong season. He tipped in compliments and knew how to make them look like wages. He liked that Rowan remembered his order and liked even more that Rowan laughed at his jokes. I watched all this from a foretop near the window where the plants grew crooked. I wrote notes on my phone about a client who wanted songs that make you feel expensive and forgiven. I kept leaving the bar before my drink was done. I knew better than to cheat first. The city wants you to audition betrayals before you cast them. I let myself flirt with a man named Dante who managed a sneaker store and liked to talk about arch support the way other people talk about love. He asked if I had a boyfriend, and I said yes in a voice that said, "But I also have an evening." He said he liked my face when I was trying not to be a cliché. We kissed in the stock room because there is something about new shoes that makes people forget what their mouths are for. I stopped us before we turned into a brochure. I went home smelling like rubber and his cologne and placed my own mouth on Rowan like an apology I didn't have the guts to title. Rowan confessed a week later in the kitchen while the radiator practiced its vowels. He said he'd kissed Milo in the cold room while a keg went empty so no one would interrupt. He said it was stupid and brief, and had felt like being a version of himself he didn't want to be, which is confession trying to make itself art. I said I had kissed someone at work, and it had been entirely about making sure I wasn't just a noun in my own house. We both cried in the small, uninteresting way people cry when they have already decided not to slam anything. We made a treaty. No more kissing anyone whose name is on a schedule you can see from our couch. No more pretending that late is a personality trait. No more being brave in rooms that don't invite us. We shook on it as if our hands were better than our mouths. It lasted as long as treaties negotiated by tired people do. Theo asked me to design a playlist for a restaurant he was opening with a partner we hadn't met. He said he'd pay our rate and then actually did. He said he loved how I made songs feel like chairs people could sit on without noticing. I agreed to a meeting because money is the most romantic reason I know. His partner, and you knew this already, was Milo. They looked tired together in the way people do when they haven't figured out if the other is furniture or storm. Milo shook my hand and didn't let go quickly enough. Theo watched my eyes and smiled like a scoreboard. Milo said he liked my work in Rowan's hands. Theo said restaurants are about the choreography you let people take home with them. I took notes and pretended I didn't know what I was writing down. Rowan started coming home at dawn with stories that had the wrong temperature. He said he'd walked Milo to the train because it was late and the city is kind for a price. He said Theo had a way of making time feel less disgusting. He said he wanted to be good. I said be ordinary and watch it be enough. He kissed me with a care that made me think of all the times people throw caution to the wind and call it learning. The night we failed all the way. Theo hosted a soft opening for friends and enemies. The room had mirrors that told people they were doing fine and a bar top that begged for elbows. Rowan worked the event off shift as a favor, which is a sentence that always means more than it says. Milo tended with him. They moved around each other like choreography, which gave me an emotion with a tax ID. Theo and I stood near the kitchen pass after hearing the 9th story about oysters. He put his hand on the small of my back in a way that made me see my own posture. He said, "Do you ever feel like you're a rehearsal for the moment someone else gets to have?" I said I feel like I'm the dress rehearsal and the audience forgot to be quiet. He said, I could make it count. I said, please don't. We kissed in a walk-in because we are people, and the universe never tires of cliché. We turned off our phones because we didn't want the wall to learn our names. Theo tasted like wine he hadn't paid for. He pressed me against a shelf that had never been erotic for anyone, and I let him. He put his hand down my pants because people who know how to tip properly also know how to be confident. It was hot. It was stupid. It was everything you imagine when you think you are too mature to imagine. We stopped because the compressor kicked on, and I remembered I had a person who called me home. I didn't tell Rowan right away because I wanted to see if my own guilt was loud enough to be useful. It was. He found out because Milo told Theo, who told a friend who liked to text me when he was drunk. The message was a screenshot of a rumor. It said we love a rhombus. I was more offended by the geometry than the gossip. I told Rowan and he did the kind of quiet that dyes a room. What followed looked like restraint and felt like injury. We slept like cousins. We spoke with accuracy. He told me he had let Milo touch him while he was closing and it had felt like letting down the wrong kind of guard. I told him I had let Theo touch me like a story I wanted to fast forward through. He said he wanted me anyway. I said the same. We took down the index card and replaced it with a receipt where I wrote in pen, "Be boring where it matters." He added in pencil, "Be obvious with love." The sex that got us back was not acrobatic. It was slow in the parts that wanted to brag and fast in the parts that wanted to be trusted. He put his mouth on my chest, and I remembered what names are for. I slid my hand under his shirt and found a bruise he didn't know he'd earned. We laughed once because our bodies miscommunicated and then didn't. He held my face like he was memorizing the reasons. I pulled him in until he stopped trying to be a lesson and started being a person again. The radiator hissed. The city blessed us with ambulance noise. We were cheap and expensive all at once. We didn't stay abstinent. We got discerning. When Theo texted, I said we couldn't be in the same geography without a chaperone made of math. He sent a photo of an empty room and said think of the sound, and I said I'm thinking of the rent. When Milo invited Rowan to a movie, he said yes, and then told me, and then told me again, and then came home early and knew where the key bowl was. The suspense didn't kill us because we refused to let it practice. It was my idea to return the spare key. Theo had one, from a night when I wasn't as careful as I wanted to be. I put it in an envelope with a note that said, "We are not brave. We are boring. It's working." I left it at his host stand while his new staff tried to look allergic to gossip. Milo texted Rowan a photo of the envelope and a heart that looked tired. Rowan texted back a thumbs up like a gentleman, which is a kind of cruelty that ages well. We didn't end up as saints or villains. We ended up as men who did less damage the second time around. Sometimes Rafa crashes on our couch after a double shift because sleep likes to borrow our air. Sometimes we stop into Theo's place because the chicken is good and our appetites no longer audition. Milo waves if he's behind the bar and pretends not to be flattered by his own kindness. We leave a 20 on a $50 check because forgiveness isn't always poetry. If you're waiting for a moral, call your mother. She will give you one. I have an apartment where the radiator still loves rumor, a bar where my boyfriend doesn't turn romance into wages, a job where I make songs that let people pretend they are main characters without making me believe them. We put the lemon magnet back on the index card, and it holds. We return the spare key. We keep the door we earned. When he comes home at 4 and tosses his keys in the bowl instead of his heart, I wake up and make room. That's our bravery. It's boring, it's true.